And now I'm going to hand over to one of you guys to take us through the presentation of the New Zealand Bird Atlas. Remembering, of course, this is really about how we, as potential fantastic bird sighters and counters, can help with the predator-free work and what you guys are doing. So please take it away.
Thanks, Nick. Tēnā koutou. As Nick said, my name's Dan Bergen, and we've tried to condense quite a lot of information now into a nice bite-sized presentation for you guys and go through it and hopefully inspire you to get involved and hopefully have plenty of time to answer any questions. So I'm just going to get straight in. So we've split this presentation into 5 key sections. And so I'm going to be talking about what the Atlas is, what eBird is, which some of you might and hopefully have downloaded and having a wee explore. Talk about some of the Atlas essentials and the power of citizen science data. And then we're going to spend some time just going through the eBird app and entering data and a few other bits and bobs as well before we answer your questions. So the first key question, of course, is what is the Atlas? And that's a really, really good question. And so as far as we're aware, the Atlas is the largest citizen science project that's currently undergoing in Aotearoa. And it started on the 1st of June 2019. It's been running for about 2.5 years. It's got another 2.5 years to go. So it's a 5-year project. It's a bit of a beast, but it's Birds New Zealand's flagship project. And it's building on a legacy of previous atlases. The first one was in the late 60s, early 70s. The second one was at the turn of the millennium, so 1999 to 2004. And this one is really cool because it's in partnership with eBird, which is a citizen science database run by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology over in the US. And so that makes it the first digital New Zealand bird atlas, which is pretty exciting and really cool in terms of how that technology is advancing our understanding and ability to gather data on a national scale. In a nutshell, the aim is really simple. It's to monitor all of New Zealand's birds over the 5-year period in order to provide up-to-date information for bird research and conservation. Anyone with an interest and a general appreciation and sort of basic ID skills can get involved, and we'll talk about that a little bit as we go through. Those final 2 logos at the bottom, as Nick said, Pat and I both work as ecologists for wildlife management, and we work as part of the Atlas team to coordinate the project. There's actually 5 of us, so Mike, Sam, and Keegan as well. And the final logo in the bottom right-hand corner is Goodness Kitchen, which is our sole sponsor, and we're always grateful for their financial support. So, second sort of thing you might be thinking, cool, that's awesome. Why is it important? What's the point of doing it? And as I said, it's sort of building on the legacy of the previous 2, and it's kind of building this really nice baseline data set as we move through time of New Zealand species. And as I said, the last atlas was at the turn of the millennium, so it started over 20 years ago. So it's really important that we try and get a snapshot of the status of bird species in Aotearoa. We know that lots of birds have declined over history. We've got a sad history in Aotearoa of lots of birds disappearing. Lots are still declining. Some may be recovering, we just don't know. And many have sort of retrenched, been pushed into those fragmented habitats due to a myriad of factors. Many of them are human-related. So, of course, we all know about introduced predators. Climate change is interacting with many of them. Pollution, land use change, lots of things happening. And so what the Atlas is going to help do is kind of provide a really, really impressive and nationwide data set that's going to aid and have impacts on bird conservation and research, we believe, for decades to come. And relating it to the predator-free New Zealand goal, moving towards that predator-free goal of eradicating some of the introduced predators in New Zealand, it's sort of providing that, how are we looking? If we do this 5-year period now and potentially do another one in 10, 20 years, we'll be closer to that goal. So how are we going to be tracking? And so gathering this data is really, really valuable because birds are really great indicators of ecosystem function and health, as well as being absolutely beautiful to look at and really, really fun to watch. So the next logical thing to sort of think about is what is eBird? Where does eBird come into this? eBird's really, really cool, and the reason that Birds New Zealand collaborated with them to sort of work with them on this atlas is that eBird is one of the world's largest citizen science databases. It's run by the Cornell Lab over in the US, but it's free to everyone across the globe. It's free to use, And it's really awesome because it allows bird enthusiasts, birders, ornithologists, researchers to gather observations in checklists, what they're seeing and hearing across the globe at any time, and to upload that to a central database to then explore and track and contribute observations to science and conservation. And that's the awesome thing, is that not only is it available to that community, but it's also then available to scientists, to conservationists, to analyze and to look at and further conservation research and trickle down into conservation management and policy, which ultimately is what we want, because we want to be protecting and helping recover the birds that we all love. And so over 1 billion bird sightings have already been contributed by eBirders around the world. Over 200 countries, nearly 250,000 people have submitted observations across the globe. So it's this immense and powerful database. And the Cornell Lab, they collaborate with hundreds of partner organizations like ourselves for these regional data entry portals, for outreach, engagement, and local impact, again, for ultimately bird conservation and conservation in general. At any one time, there are thousands of people submitting lists across the globe and uploading their observations to this central eBird portal. And that is then available to the birding community, but also to scientists and researchers, and just illustrating that global citizen science community is there and ever growing. So I've been mentioning portal a lot. And so the way that we've been explaining this to try and understand it, because this is important, is the way like Russian dolls fit into each other. So you've got the global eBird database, that largest portal, it's the largest of the dolls. And if you popped off inside there, you'd have lots of regional and countrywide ones. So Canada, France, Australia, and New Zealand. That one was created in 2008. But specifically for this project, Cornell created a nice wee portal for us. So if you popped that New Zealand Russian doll off again, inside there is the smallest portal, and that's the Atlas portal. That's open for the 5-year period, and we're encouraging everyone to be submitting their lists to that portal so that they can go into tools like the Atlas FMAP, which I'll touch on next. But essentially, just to illustrate how those fit in, and that portal, the New Zealand Bird Atlas eBird portal, it's a bit of a mouthful. It acts like a really nice funnel, collecting all that information, and then, as I say, trickles into the Atlas FMAP, which is really important for us to gauge how we're tracking. So if I skip on to the next slide, this is a screenshot of the FMAP of North Island. And as you can see, there's lots of little colored dots, and that's representing the amount of effort that's gone in so far to the project. If you look on the right-hand side, you can see there's a little scale. The darker the squares, the more effort that's gone in. So places like Auckland, Tauranga, Hamilton, New Plymouth on the West Coast as well. Really, really dark squares. And that's where obviously we've got a lot of people, but where people are submitting a lot of data. As you spread out into the wop-wops, into the rural areas, into those harder to reach squares, of course, there's either very little or there's no effort there currently. And so that really helps us, because going back to that aim, we need to be mapping across the whole country and sort of gathering data on all of the bird species across the country. And so that helps us sort of say, oh, sweet, we need to go out this weekend and go up into the hills, or maybe we can do a roadie down and visit, so-and-so, friends and family, go and get some bird observations there. When I say the whole country, so this is a snapshot of the North Island. The Atlas is covering the North Island, South Island, the Stewart Islands, and Chatham Islands, as well as the Sub-Antarctics and the Kermadec. As I said, it's a bit of a beast of a project, so we're trying to get coverage across all of those places and get data and observations from all of those different places. And so that's the effort map and the portal in essence. And so you might be thinking, cool, where does the app come into this? Where does eBird, collecting data? So there's 2 key ways that you can collect data with eBird, and that's either through the app, which is the method that we're recommending as the primary data method, and I'll touch on why in a bit, or online. You can use the online portal. And what you see there is just that general list of bird species, and that's just likely bird species that you're going to encounter. Pat is going to talk through a little bit more of this later on, so you'll sort of get a better understanding, and of course we can answer any more questions as well. But I've been mentioning checklists as well. And so eBird is really, really great at providing this really nice, simple, easy to use once you've kind of used it a couple of times and got your head around it and got your confidence up. But it's also this nice scientific framework, this consistency throughout. And checklists essentially are there for you to collate what you're seeing and hearing, but also you're collecting really valuable information on not only what birds you're seeing and hearing at that moment in time, but also when you are seeing them and hearing. So 5th of April this year, 9:20 in the morning, where I was seeing them. So this is East Coast of Marlborough. And how much effort has gone into them. So it was 37 minutes, it was just me, and I walked around about 900 meters. And so all of that data sort of gets collected in a checklist, uploaded to the portal, and that's really, really valuable. All of that sort of complete package is really super valuable. What's really cool about the app and why we're advocating its use is those latter three, the when, the where, and the how, they're all automatically collected by the app just when you press the start and the stop button, which is awesome because then it just leaves you to focus on the what. What are you seeing and what are you hearing? And so you might be sort of thinking, cool, well, if there's hundreds of thousands of people uploading data all the time across the world, is there anyone like checking the data? What about data quality? Is there some sort of, automatic system? And there is. So there's these things called filters. So when you start a checklist, either on the app or click the submit button online, you're presented with a list of likely birds for that region and the date. And that's based on these filters. And they've been developed by knowledgeable bird experts around the world. Each of the regions in New Zealand has a filter. And essentially they're there to trap any sort of odd records, whether it's a rare bird or an unusual bird for that time of year, or any really, really high counts that wouldn't be expected necessarily. And that's your opportunity at that point to add in really good description of what birds you're seeing, how you identified them, how you counted those 2,000 paradise shell ducks. Add in photos, say, of the Australasian grebes that you've seen, add some audio of the rowie calling, whatever it is. And then that goes to regional reviewers to assess and either say, yep, she's done a fantastic job there. Awesome, I can accept that. Or potentially they would get in touch and ask for more information or indeed sort of help you with the ID of those species. Pat and myself are reviewers for Marlborough, Nelson and Tasman. There's around about 15 of us across the country and we're all volunteer reviewers. So they're there and sort of reacting to when the data is uploaded. But we also wanted to be proactive with this project as well. And that's where the Atlas Essentials come in. Sorry, I skipped one through there. So we wanted to be proactive and kind of encourage people to be thinking about when they're going out and collecting this really valuable information, what do they need to be thinking about to really ramp up the scientific value of those observations? And so that's where these Atlas Essentials or golden rules or best practices, whatever you want to call them, that's where these come in. And there's kind of 6 key ones that we keep on talking about. And as I say, we can talk about these in the question time later as well if anyone wants us to go over them. First one, submit to the Atlas portal. Hopefully that's sort of clued in by now, sort of helping us funnel that data and getting an accurate gauge on where people are going. That effort map updates nearly every hour, so we can gauge on where we need to be spreading our effort out a bit more. Second one is complete checklists. So as I'm kind of showing, that complete checklist is a list of species that you were able to identify by sight and sound without intentionally leaving anything off. So you're including the house sparrows, you're including the wild rock-furrel pigeons, and it's all of the wild species that you are able to identify. Some of you might be thinking, my bird ID isn't maybe as great as the next person. Don't worry, Pat's going to be talking about a few bird ID supporting tools. We're always here to answer your questions if you've got any. And eBird's really great at sort of taking into account that wide spectrum of bird identification skills. And Pat's also going to be talking about a few other bits and bobs that you can sort of add in that help with maybe a few unknowns while you're out there. So complete checklists. The third and fourth one, time and distance. This is all about increasing the resolution of the data. Again, increasing that scientific value. So time, recommend spending no less than 5 minutes on a checklist. And if you're out for a couple of hours, splitting them into hour sections maybe. Distance, again, imagine you're on this beach, enjoying the sunrise. You're going to walk along the beach, back through some bush, and then back through town, back home. It's going to be around about 10 Ks, you reckon. Rather than do one long list, 10 Ks, we recommend splitting them up into 1.5, 2 kilometer sections, just to increase that resolution again. And as you can imagine, that helps with associating different species with different habitats as well. So walking on the beach, I'm seeing gulls, terns, shags, maybe a gannet. As I go back into the bush, I'm seeing fantail, warblers, bellbirds. And then as you get back into town, probably you're going to start hitting house sparrows, starlings, feral rock pigeons. So again, increasing the scientific accuracy of those. The fifth one, accurate counts. So again, imagine that you are standing on this beach enjoying the sunrise and you're doing an Atlas checklist. Rather than just putting an X or, putting like heaps of goals, you're accurately counting each of the 16 of the red-billed gulls that are shown here. Adding in that accurate count, again, increasing the scientific value of those observations. Say you've got thousands of gulls on the beach, rather than, again, just putting X, give your best estimate. You might have a group of Canada geese fly overhead. Just give your best estimate. I think there's about 50. Count them in roughly tens, or if there's thousands, count them in roughly hundreds, however best you can. And the final one is seasonal effort. So again, thinking about, standing on this beach, I want to go back to this beach in the winter, the spring, summer, and the autumn to take into account those known changes, those fluctuations in bird distribution, bird abundance, different species coming and going. And the final one that we like to add in, of course, is that this is meant to be fun. This is citizen science at its best. It's a really, really awesome challenge. It can seem a little bit overwhelming at the beginning, but honestly, once you get your head around it, get into the swing of things and create the habit of doing these checklists either every day or the weekend or whatever, it is really fun. We run challenges every month that you can win some really cool prizes. We do outreach, we run workshops. And it's a growing community. Over 1,000 people have already submitted data, and we would love you to be submitting data as well and really enjoy and relish this challenge just as we do. And so it kind of leads nicely onto the final sort of section, kind of thinking about, okay, I'm thinking potentially about getting involved. Is it worth it? How valuable are my observations really? If I'm going to be putting observations in my backyard, or when I'm doing a trap line, or when I'm out hunting or on a great walk or going and visiting family, is it really going to be that valuable? And so we'll talk briefly about the power of this citizen science data. Again, sort of relating it to the bigger picture here. The bird sightings that you contribute, as I said, whether in your backyard, whether when you're checking a trap line, whether you way out in the sticks while you're doing some hunting, or even just going on a road trip, that is going to contribute and continue to help advance the science and knowledge and analysis of the birds that are in New Zealand. Those complete checklists that you gather, that complete picture, is going to help produce cutting edge outputs. And I'm going to touch on a few in a bit. Lots of this data is used by an ever-growing plethora of experts, whether it's regional councils, PhD students, scientists, there's a growing number of people who are using this to further conservation management, research, policy, and it's having impacts on local, regional, national, and international scales. So it's really, really cool, and just hopefully just trying to illustrate that, just contributing data can be really, really valuable. There's a lot going on in the world right now with climate change, biodiversity loss, and COVID. And, lots of people can probably feel, myself included, you do feel a little bit helpless at times. What can I do? What is really going to have a tangible outcome? And honestly, getting involved with citizen science, getting involved with trapping, obviously, is going to have tangible outcomes in New Zealand for the taonga in this country. And so when I talk about sort of the cutting edge outputs that are produced by this, your observations can help produce things like these moving maps for species like shining cuckoo over international scales, helping show the life cycle as they move around and migrate. And also, maps for species that we're all really, really in love with, kaka, really cool. And we know that as we move towards the predator-free New Zealand goal, moving towards that 2050 goal, and with places like Zealandia and more sort of reserves, that overspilling, how is that going to change? We hope, obviously, we're going to track over time this recovery, this regeneration, spillover as these bird species, these native and endemic bird species, start to get back into the areas that they were lost from. So this is a static map from 2019. This is all eBird data. It's all modeled for kaka. And how is this going to look in 5, 10, 20 years? Well, fingers crossed, they're just going to keep on spreading. And this is really valuable for community groups, obviously, sort of seeing where best their efforts are going to go to, but also on regional and national scales. Where are we sort of needing all of our efforts? How are we best going to be able to protect these species? And this is all produced from eBird citizen science data. When we say citizen science, we mean citizen scientists like yourselves. And so next, I'm going to hand over to Pat to sort of talk about how you can contribute and how you can sort of upload these scientifically valuable observations.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Dan. And hi, everyone. So after you've heard Dan talk about what the Atlas is and why it's important, now you're probably wondering, well, how can I contribute? And the simple answer is by submitting your bird checklists. As we near the halfway point of the Atlas sampling period, so that's 2019 through to 2024, we're really trying to start targeting those more remote grid squares. So it's the backcountry spots that have seen little or no effort so far. But the really good thing about the Atlas is that checklists from literally anywhere in the country have immense value and contribute to the data set in a really important way. So birding in your back garden or on your local walk in level 3 or level 4 lockdown is still important, and we do encourage that. So how do you submit data? Essentially, there are two ways that you can do this. First is to record bird checklists in your notebook, whether you're out doing a trap line or if it's just in your back garden or wherever it is, along with those details that Dan mentioned earlier of how long you birded for and where you birded for, and the distance that you travelled as well, even if those are just estimates. And then you can submit this data through the New Zealand Bird Atlas eBird portal. There's just a couple of screenshots there, just going to the Submit tab. And basically, it's fairly self-explanatory there, and there are some instructions that will help guide you along the way. The second way, and the way that we are advocating for, is for people to submit data through the eBird app. It's really simple to use, and it captures all that effort data for you, as Dan mentioned earlier. If you've got the app, there are two really key settings that you first need to change. So this is under the settings page on the app. And the first one is that bottom one down there where it says portal. That needs to be changed to the New Zealand Bird Atlas portal. And that's just so that data gets sort of siphoned off specifically to the Atlas. Normally that will just go to, when you download the app, the default is for it to just go to the global one, but we really want that data partitioned off for the Atlas specifically. So you need to change that. And also another one is the show the common names in. It'll say when you download it English US. We highly recommend you change this to English New Zealand. Otherwise, you'll get a few species names that will be quite confusing. The good thing is, once you change that, once you won't have to do it again. Every time you open the app, those settings will stay the same.
So now I'm just going to run you through sort of a hypothetical checklist, an eBird checklist. Well, when you open up eBird, this is the screen that you'll see. And I'm on Apple iPhone, but it's more or less the same for an Android as well. The default here is for it to the app to default to the current date and time. But if, say, you'd recorded a bird checklist in your notebook and you wanted to enter that at a later date, the app does allow you to go back and enter older data. But for this example, we're just going to go with the default time. So when you're ready to start your checklist, all you do is hit the big green button saying Start Checklist. And what the app's doing is it's taking a GPS location and then from that giving you a list of likely species to be in that area. What we mentioned earlier as part of your complete checklist, some of the data that you need to record is the amount of time that you spent doing your checklist and the distance that you travelled on that checklist. Now, the awesome thing about the app that you won't get entering data online or anything like that is that the app is automatically capturing that data for you. So as you can see in the top left, the timer there, and then as you walked around, if you were walking around, you would see that distance start to increase too. So what the app does is it groups the species by taxonomic groups. Up the top, you've got ducks, and then you sort of come down through waders, and then through seabirds, and then all the way down to your passerines, or your sort of garden birds, the ones you're likely to find in your garden. This can be somewhat annoying if you are doing just a garden checklist. You've got to scroll through all those other species just to get there. So what we recommend is down the bottom left, there's the icon that looks sort of like a bar chart with 3 lines. You just click that and then click on Smart Sort and then the close button. And what it will do there is reorder the species. You only have to do that once, and we recommend you do that at the start. What that's doing there is, see up the top it says likely species based on 196 checklists in a 20 by 20 kilometre area. So it's looked at the checklists around your area, seen what's on them, and then grouped them by what is most likely. So there you've got all your sort of common garden birds right there. Below all that you've got the infrequent birds, so some ones that appear on the occasional checklist but not a huge amount, and then the sort of unreported species, the rare species, right down there. As you can see, there's some little icons next to them, and that's basically just telling you the same thing. So the reds are sort of uncommon, yellow's infrequent, and nothing is the more common ones. So let's say for this hypothetical checklist, you're going for your walk in your local area down to the park. Let's just say, you've started your checklist and the first thing you see is the spur-wing plover. All you have to do is go and click the little plus sign just next to the species, and that'll add 1 spur-wing plover there. The next thing you might see is a black-backed gull. Same thing, you just click that and that adds 1 black-backed gull. Off in the distance you see a harrier hawk, so you just click that and now you've got 1 harrier hawk on your checklist. Pretty easy stuff, really. Next, let's say you see a pair of fantails flittering around in the bush just over there. Exact same, just tap that twice and now you've got 2 fantail. Then let's say you see 1 off in the distance as well. Click that, add another 1, you've got 3 there. After that, let's say you see 8 silver eyes fly over. Well, rather than going and tapping that button 8 times, what you can do is just click the species and that brings up sort of a pop-up. You type in 8 there, it's much easier than tapping that button 8 times. In this little pop-up, if you wanted to, you can add additional species, behaviours or anything that you see about that bird. When you're done, you click the done and that brings you back to this list. Next thing, let's say you see a bunch of starlings fly over. You're sure they're starlings, but you could only count maybe about half of them. You reckon in half the group there was about 12. What we say is that estimating is far better than just putting how many you can count or just leaving it off altogether. So you think you saw about half and you counted 12, well, double that and let's just say you estimate there was about 25. As you go through your checklist, you can just tap. There, you heard a song thrush, add that in. Let's say next you see another black-backed gull. It's different to the one you saw earlier. Well, rather than scrolling back all the way through to get to black-backed gull, what you can just do is just tap the little tick button down the bottom there, and that brings you up just the species that you've observed. And then you can go ahead and tap black-backed gull and add 1 there. From this list, you can just search for species. So let's say you see a blackbird, you can just search from there and then add 1 blackbird. Another little tip is if you saw, say, 5 chaffinch, you can just put 5 chaffinch and then tap the species name, and that will automatically add whatever number you put in there, that number to that species. Next, let's say you see 20 small songbirds fly over the top here, and you're not quite sure what they were. They could have been sparrows, they could have been some kind of finch, but you're sure they were songbirds or passerines. Well, you can just put that, so you can put 20 passerines. So eBird does allow you to enter data at those sort of higher taxonomic groups, or SPIs as we call them, so species. There's also another thing, so say you hear something and you think it's a bellbird, but you're not quite sure it's calling, is it a bellbird or is it a tui? There's what we call slashes in there as well. So there's tui / bellbird. So you could put that in there. And then let's say, actually, no, it flew out of the bush and you saw it definitely was a bellbird. You can delete stuff. So for iPhone, it's swipe to the left, or for Android, it's a long click, and then you can delete that. So if you make a mistake, in this case, we're saying that tui / bellbird is definitely a bellbird, so we're going to add one bellbird. When you're done with your checklist, all you have to do is literally hit the stop button. So what we recommend is sort of a minimum of 5 minutes and about a maximum of 1 hour, and trying to just increase the resolution of that data. Also, if you're doing a traveling count, it can be any distance you want, but we recommend cutting it down to sort of 1 or 2 kilometers. So when you're done, click stop track, and then it sort of brings you to this summary page. So at the top there, we've got the date and the time, which we chose at the start. We just wanted the default, the current, and you've got to choose next your location. So you click on that orange button and it brings up this. This may be slightly different on an Android, but it's the same sort of idea. So you click on the map and that brings up an aerial photo, and as you zoom out, you'll see the Atlas grid squares on there as well. The blue locations are on there are my own personal locations, so lots there in the local area, as you can see. And the orange are just birding hotspots, so you don't have to worry too much about them. What you do when you're selecting a location is zoom in as close as you can to the location that you are, and long hold and click. You can rename the location if you want, or you can select previously used locations, and that's what I'm going to do in this case. Click use location. The next step is this a complete checklist of the birds that you were able to identify? In this case, yes. And again, that's what we're asking people to do, is try identify everything you can to the best of your abilities, and make that a complete checklist. So not intentionally leaving stuff off. Just go through, check, make sure those are all the species that you saw. And then once you've got that and you're happy with it, you've reviewed that, if you had any checklist comments you needed to make, you can add them there. But once you're done there, you'd hit that green button and submit the checklist.
So just before we sort of wrap it up, you may be thinking, and I have seen a few comments in there that, I want to contribute, but perhaps my bird ID, you might not think your bird ID is quite strong enough for this. So that's where the Merlin Bird ID app comes in. So Merlin is a completely free bird ID app, which has a New Zealand pack which you can download. And this has information on over 250 species of bird found in New Zealand. And as you can see here, there are loads of species. Each one has a description and photos that go along with it. It's really cool. It all works offline, and it also doesn't take up much space on your phone. And so, highly recommend downloading this along with the eBird app. And for each species, there is also distribution maps. So you can see down the bottom there, there's information, photos, distribution maps, and then sound recordings too. And one should play here. This is all, as I said, completely free and works offline as well. And so the app is a really good way of learning to associate those calls with particular birds, so the photos that are there. And what's also really cool is it works intimately with the eBird app. So here I've got the eBird app, and let's say greenfinch. You want to know what that looks like, you can just click the little Merlin symbol there within your eBird checklist, and that'll automatically take you through the species page. And you can listen to calls for it, and in this case, you could confirm that that was a greenfinch, flick back to your eBird checklist and add in greenfinch. And sort of just to wrap up, we realised there was quite a lot of information here in this webinar. What we'd recommend is going to the New Zealand Bird Atlas site, the eBird portal, and having a look at the About tab, having a look through that, and there's loads of stuff. And as always, if you need any help, please get in contact with us.
Nice job, you two. Thank you very much. Quite a lot of information there. Would you? Yeah, and you guys have become very good at the app, of course, because you've made it. But so what do you recommend with people? Just slowly and surely, just go through it and just keep using it, and pretty quickly you'll get to know it really well.
Yeah, I think definitely. I sort of walked through the app there in that video, but the best way to learn is to just get the app, have a go with it, and I promise you'll find it really easy and simple and intuitive to use. The more you do.
And as Pat said, if you are struggling, just sing out. Honestly, we've gone through it with heaps of different people all over the country, different ages, different sort of ID skills, and different technological abilities, and we're pretty confident that we can get you on track and get you confident and comfortable using it. So.
Now, lovely Emma there has written, brilliant, thank you for the webinar. I'm a teacher and I'm planning to use with my students. I reckon that's gold for you, isn't it?
Legend. Yeah, that's awesome. There's anyone can get involved, as you said. And, if you want to do it with your students, then that's, legend. Thanks, Emma. And again, if you want us to potentially run a workshop specifically with your students, more than happy, just sing out.
I'm just going to fire questions at you that I see. What about one-off bird sightings? And I think this person mentions a cuckoo in particular.
Yep. There is some value to them. So in eBird, they're what we call incidental checklists. So that's just identifying, one particular species of interest. There is some value to them, but it's quite limited. It's sort of limited only to the distribution of the species. That sort of data won't go into those species maps like Dan showed, because what we really want to know is that shining cuckoo, but actually also equally important are the other things that are there, because when you make that checklist complete, you're also telling us what is not there. So that negative data is super important. So yes, one-off observations have some value, but we do recommend, if you saw that shining cuckoo there and you want to add that in, maybe just spend 5 minutes and count the house sparrows and the silver eyes too and make it a complete one. Increase the value of that checklist.
Fantastic. Lots of questions coming in, so I'll just go back. Some of these will be old and some of them are just coming in. Perhaps this person says, perhaps I missed this. What's the overlap with the annual garden bird survey?
Oh, okay. So that's a really good question. So lots of people love the garden bird survey and it's definitely got its value, but it's very focused on that 1 week and everyone's back gardens. So what we're sort of advocating is if you really enjoy that, you're going to love the Atlas because it's anywhere at any time. You don't have to do it just in your back garden. And as Pat has shown you can take that app in your pocket. You can go way out in the wop-wops at any time of the year, put in all of your observations. It's the same sort of premise. It's citizen scientists coming together, gathering data to fill in those gaps across the country. And that's it. It's kind of like the garden bird survey, like to the next level. So if you really enjoy that, then you're going to love the Atlas Challenge.
If someone isn't confident identifying an observed bird, is it better, in your opinion, in terms of data, to make a guess or just discount the observation?
What we'd recommend is, as I showed in that video, if you can go to that higher taxonomic level. So, and that's a really good question, actually. And we would advocate for actually not taking a guess and just going to that higher taxonomic level. So if it's a small songbird, just say passerine spur instead. There's a whole bunch of different sort of groups of species. So if it was a gull and you're not sure what gull species it is, there is a gull spur as well. And it even goes to higher levels than that. So the highest is bird spur. So if you were that unsure about what it was, but you were sure it was a bird, you can put that in.
Someone's just asking a good question about offline. So you may have covered this. So you go in, you're offline. Then when you go back and you get online, it then uploads?
Exactly that. So we do it quite a lot with the work that we're very privileged to be able to go, offshore islands, way out in like the Molesworth. So it works using the GPS in your phone. You press the start button. You don't need cell service. You'll grab that self-fix. You do your checklist just as Pat showed you how to do it, and then stop it. And then once you're back in self-service or you've got Wi-Fi again, load it up, have a look through, double check, make sure your location's correct, and then submit it, and it's away, and it's in there in the global or in the Atlas portal, hopefully. So yeah.
Is your data available for public use on your portal?
Yes, it is. Yeah. So eBird is open source. It can be used by anyone for any reason that's not for commercial purposes, basically. So to make money. So you just have to put in a data request with eBird, and you can access data from anywhere in the world.
Does it interact with iNaturalist for unusual observations?
Well, so this is a great question as well. So iNaturalist is a bit broader and a bit more general. You can put in lots of different species groups. eBird is far more focused on one species, so birds, that's it. And that's where its strength lies. And that's where actually a lot of global scientists are actually using eBird data. They are using some iNaturalist data, but eBird data, because of that structure, that scientific framework that it provides, just allows it to be used specifically for sort of robust science on bird conservation and research.
Somebody just asked, they walk the same sort of pathway almost all the time. Is it better to go to another pathway? Is it if they walk it again, is it fine just to put in the birds? That's fine with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, great question. Yes, absolutely. It still has value even if you are, doing a checklist every day in your back garden. What we are saying is, once we sort of move out of level 3, level 4 lockdown, is we are trying to push into those more remote grid squares. So if you look at the Atlas effort map, you'll see where those gaps are, and we do need to get data for them. So we're trying to tell people to try go to the areas that don't have so much data, but at the same time, do checklists wherever you want, whenever you want, even if it's the same location. They still have value.
Yeah. Mark just said, any chance of getting eBird species named in Te Reo?
Great question, and this has come up before. It's a great question, and we're starting the process again of trying to seriously look at this. But as some of you might be aware, there's quite a lot of variance in Te Reo names for one species. Fantail is a great example, and so is bellbird. There's so many different Te Reo names, and of course, we want to get it right. We want to make sure that there's no offence taken by what is selected over another. And so we're actually working with the Department of Conservation, because they've just released their Falcon online banding system and lots of different available names. So watch this space. Essentially, we are working on that. It's a great question, and of course, we are 100% committed to try and get those Te Reo names in there at some stage. And
so, how do we contact you if you have specific questions that we want you guys to be able to help us through?
The best way is either through Facebook, send us a message on Facebook, or we have the Atlas email, which all of the team have access to, and that's probably the easiest for a lot of people. So it's just nzbirdatlas, all lowercase, all one word, at wmil.co.nz. So it's nzbirdatlas at wmil.co.nz. And we usually get back to you within a couple of hours, and we'd be more than happy to help you however it is, whether it's walking through the app, whether it's setting up a workshop, whether it's discussing the bigger picture side of things, whatever it is, just sing out. We're super keen to help you.
Guys, it's fantastic you've given up your time for us today, and in level 3 lockdown and level 4 for some, and of course of many. I suppose you could just leave us with how come two bright-eyed and bushy-tailed men like you are enjoying this space so much. Can you give us a bit of an insight? Because, leave us with some great words of positive wisdom.
I'd just say, as Dan said earlier, enjoy it. It's not meant to be, a job. We do this as well. I mean, we do this as part of our job, coordinating this, but we also contribute to the Atlas in our own spare time. We love doing it. It takes you to some awesome places. It takes you to some places that you would never visit otherwise, but you go there to see what birds are there. And I've discovered some really neat little places that I never would have gone to otherwise. So give it a go. I'm sure you'll enjoy it, and you'll also be contributing to conserving New Zealand's bird biodiversity.
I think that's the biggest thing. Yeah, it's kind of finding what is working for you, whether it's the sense of community, whether it's the competitive side, sort of trying to get more grid squares than your colleague or your neighbor, whatever it is, or it's that bigger picture lens, thinking, how can I contribute to this? How can I make a difference? And whether you want to pick one or all of those, we're all for it. And we just really hope that you join the community, because it's awesome. We're super passionate about it. And like Pat says, it's a really fun challenge.
Thanks, guys, very much. Sounds to me like you've motivated quite a few people watching this webinar to get stuck in now, and you've made it much easier. And that's what this is all about as we move more and more into this field. See you again. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers, Nick.
Bye.